My name is Candace Montgomery. I'm an organizer in the world. I love bringing people together. I'm also a facilitator and a trainer, so I like to create intentional space for people to learn how to build collectively. Yeah, so my job is, or like the work that I like to do is about connecting with people based on the things that they care about in the world, and the issues and the problems that they really want to address in their world, their community, wherever, and really bringing people together based off of that common self-interest and building power to address those issues, to address the players who are behind closed doors making decisions that are causing those issues in people's lives. So that's really my job, and working with people to take those risks and to make those decisions collectively and to connect more people to the work consistently. My younger brother, who's 15, who is a young Black man in America, it was here this past weekend, and I was talking to him about our great-grandmother, who was a sharecropper, our great-grandmother Hickman, and just like really like how the reality of that, like a lot of the things that she faced in the world, the fights that she had to go through, the conversations she had to have with the young Black men in her family and the other young Black people in her family, they're so similar to today. And so I think when people ask me the question about like how does history connect to the work, it's really like I'm trying to channel her. I'm trying to channel that legacy, trying to channel like the energy of my ancestors to actually change something, so that a generation down the line we don't have to continue to have the same conversation about race and racism in this country, and that we're actually working towards a place where people have equity, and the things that they need. So I think that's really how it connects to the work. And then there's obviously a long legacy of like amazing Black women and amazing queer Black women who have been organizers and who have been the backbone of pretty much every movement that there is. And so I really am like out there fighting for them too, because unfortunately, because I think the combination of like racist narratives and sexist narratives, their stories are invisible in our movement history. And so I think that's the work too, is really like having America actually see that Black women have been rocking this since day one. And that we will continue to do it, and that like our leadership is necessary and has always been crucial, and that now is really the time for us to recognize that. And that's why I throw down with the Black Lives Matter movement, because that's really what it's about. It's about centering the leadership of those who are traditionally marginalized inside of our movements, because that's where we know where our strength is, because those are the folks who are directly impacted by the problems. Therefore, like they are the ones who know the solutions. So I think that's kind of how history connects to the work that I do, is like living out those legacies of Black leaders, Black women leaders, and doing what we do is like building our communities, bringing them together, fighting back whatever we need to fight back, but also like imagining new futures for ourselves, and imagining a way of being, and each day collectively working towards that. Like that's the work.
Not in the car, nothing. And he said tomorrow they're gonna grant my brother eagle feather, and they're gonna make him a chief because he went to Wounded Knee for the women and children. And so he went to sleep about 2 o'clock in the morning. He was dreaming. All of a sudden, he saw this sheet lightning coming from the west. And he saw the trees blowing back and forth. And all of a sudden, boom! About 2:30 in the morning, he was sleeping. A bolt of thunder hit, and he woke up and it was lightning, and the trees were blowing back and forth, and it started to drizzle. And he jumped up and grabbed his gear, walked 4 miles out to his car, jumped in his car, came back, and the next day he said, "From this day forth, your name will be Nigan, the way we're done." I said, "What does it mean?" It means the thunder before the storm. That's what the creator, that's my name. That's how we got our name. And that's how my granddaughter, and millions today, every family I know in America where I speak and travel, every family, when women are pregnant, I go up and touch them and tell them that you got to prepare a name for that child. Now, all the Indian people are taking back their spiritual names. They're not Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, or Clyde. But I like Nigan, the way we're done, thunder before the storm, a lot better than Clyde. So when we first started, we weren't allowed to have long hair, speak our language, sing songs. Our religious freedom was outlawed all over America. We couldn't sundance, we couldn't pray, we couldn't purify, we couldn't do any weddings or naming ceremonies or anything. And that was enforced by the churches. The churches monitored all that. So when we formed in July of 1968, we looked at white European education, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is the federal government, and organized religion. And I'm not talking about Christianity now. I have some very dear friends in the Christian world. They not only walk in Jesus Christ's footsteps, they walk in Bigfoot's footsteps into Wounded Knee when we needed them. And I have dear friends with them. I was the first person appointed to the Archdiocese of Minneapolis-St. Paul. I was the first indigenous person ever put on board there. And the priest that did that comes from this community. And 6 weeks after he did that, the church started condemning him. They funded a program for us, but they wouldn't give him the money because he said that the church violated all the commandments of God, including the massacre. They played a big role. They never said a word here in the state of Minnesota and they referred to Sibley as Long Knife Sibley because he started the first scalping policy against Indians. We didn't know anything about that. But that's the way they stereotype us. That's the way they portray us in the media industry and history books. Like we're the ones that were scalping people. It's not true. Here in Minnesota, they call them Long Knife Sibley. We're going to call you AIM. I said, what are you talking about? What's AIM? What does it mean? Why are you aiming to do something about police brutality? You're aiming to do something about racism. You're aiming to do something about housing. You're aiming to do something about education and health. And I said, but what does it mean? And she said, American Indian movement. I said, oh, no. No. I said, we don't want to be called Indians anymore. Because some pirate was 18,000 miles off his course, floundering and lost in the high sea, thinking he landed in another part of the world. They call us Indians today. We don't, oh, she says, Graham, she said to me, she jerked me like that a little bit. She said, listen here, Sonny, Indians, what they use to oppress us, and Indians, what we use to gain our freedom. I said, okay. We went into the board meeting, they proposed it, and the people debated it, and they voted unanimously that we become that declaration. So today, this little ragtag organization that formed here to deal with police brutality and poverty here in Minneapolis-St. Paul area now represents over 365 million indigenous people worldwide. That's what an organization can do if their heart is in it and if they have the vigilance to stick with something, follow up on it. Don't let it go. Don't turn it over to somebody else to do for you. And that's what I've done. I've been here from day one. I've never backed away from anything. My convictions that I have, about a million of people. And I spoke at the Salma celebration over in the church in St. Paul here a few months ago, and they had invited me there, but they didn't have me on the agenda when I got there. And I pushed my way in. And I addressed them, and I said, I support Black Lives Matter 100%. I'm not speaking out against it and anything of that. I told them the history of Indian people, and I said Indian lives matter too. You know.
Sure. So I'm BOTHAO-URABE, and I am a community builder. I've spent most of my life working with community and trying to really bring different people together to both tackle challenges, but also to think about what kind of world we want to live in and what it will take to get there. Mm-hmm. Sure. So I am a child refugee. I came here with my family when I was 6 years old, and my parents lived through what we call the secret war in Laos. Laos was supposed to be a neutral country during the Vietnam War, but of course it wasn't. Almost everybody was there, including the United States, and my father was a soldier in the secret force that the CIA created to combat the communist.
He was recruited into that.
He was recruited into that. And so we, during that time, lived in Laos, and then eventually when the U.S. left the country in 1975, my family, I think my mom says, you know, they tried to stay as long as they could, but when it got too dangerous, and my father was still off fighting, but she had, you know, 4 small children and was by herself, and then eventually all the villagers were leaving, and she tried to hide in the jungles with us for as long as she could, and then eventually some villagers came by, and there was an elderly gentleman. He was also a Vang, and my mom is a Vang, and in the Hmong community, if you have the same last name, you're considered family.
Right.
And so he basically told her, you have to leave because the communist soldiers are coming, and if they find you and the kids, they will kill you. So
she left without your dad.
she left without my dad,
wow.
and he helped her carry a couple of us. And she had some silver bars and things, so she paid another woman to carry, you know, 2 of us, and we made our way, and somehow miraculously near the Thai border, my father found us, and so they were reunited before we entered Thailand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think it's easiest sometimes to organize with people who are more like you at the beginning. But when you're talking about systems change, when you're talking about cultural transformation, it has to be intergenerational, right? Because a lot of the people who make up the rules or who are holders of particular values are different than you. And so, yes, and have the power and authority to you know, persuade things happening. I mean, it could take a really long time. So, so I have tried in a lot of my work to make sure that there is intergenerational voice, and that is a challenge in the community, especially in the Hmong community, where the majority of people are really under the age of 20. For the first time, we have many more American-born Hmong kids than foreign-born, so it's a tipping point for the community. Yeah. Just how are you convicted to the idea of justice, right? How are we attentive to what is happening to us every day, and being aware, but also more thoughtful and intentional about the kinds of actions that we take that not only solves that problem for a short term, but that pushes us to reimagine a world that is different than what we have now. And so I think, to me, vigilance is really a conviction and a commitment to continuously reflecting on our own actions as well as our larger collective action about whether it's actually achieving justice, right? So not just parity. Does everybody have the same thing? But are people able to negotiate what they need and want, right? And are solutions really designed and crafted by those who are most impacted by social injustices in our society? And I think, you know, to me, vigilance is how do we constantly hold that in our head?
Okay, I'm Ricardo Levins Morales, and I'm a visual artist, or to put it differently, I'm what do I call myself? A trickster, organizer, and healer disguised as an artist. I see the pieces of art I do as nutrients and antibodies that are designed to help stimulate the collective immune system of communities. You know, what is it that's keeping any community or group of people from being powerful, from feeling powerful? Not in terms of the external oppressions that they're experiencing, but what is it that suppresses their own capacity to resist that? And so it's a question of storytelling. What are the stories? What are the stories? Where do you put the acupuncture needle, the cultural acupuncture needle, to counter the toxic narratives that people absorb that keep them from aligning with each other, or from seeing each other as potential allies, or understanding their own capacity, or understanding what are the conditions that are holding them down? Well, I was born into an anti-colonial family in Puerto Rico. My parents were involved in the independence movement. I moved to the United States in a very turbulent time.
How old were you?
I was 11.
Okay.
So I was just hitting adolescence, which is inherently a turbulent time in its own right. I left home, dropped out of high school very early, but had available to me the social movements of the day, which are about treating trauma. I mean, it's about reclaiming power, and trauma is about the loss of power, so that being involved in organizing as a youngster, I think, was inherently healing. And I've been at it ever since. I had a lot of awareness because of my family. It was the police killing of a young black man that actually drew me into political activism in Chicago at that time. Fred Hampton is a well-known name. He was the head of the local chapter of the Black Panther Party. To me, he didn't seem like a youngster, right? He was one of the older guys. Right? Those guys were in their 20s. But that's what made me into an activist. And over the years, I've been drawn into many different types of movements. But there's really, like when people look at my artwork, they say, well, how do you connect with so many different issues? And what are the issues that are most important? To me, there's really only one issue. And that is human resilience in the face of oppression. That's my issue.